4 years. That's what beating a woman on camera, dragging her down a hotel hallway, and terrorizing her for over a decade got Sean Combs. 4 years. And somehow he thought he was walking out that courtroom a free man. Make it make sense. Sean Combs, Diddy, Puff Daddy, Bad Boy Records, whatever name he went by, the man built an empire. We're talking record labels, fashion lines, television networks. He was the blueprint for what a mogul looked like in hip-hop. Started from nothing after his father was murdered when he was just a kid, worked his way up, became one of the most powerful men in entertainment. But power has a way of showing you who somebody really is. And for Sean Combs, that power meant he could do whatever he wanted to whoever he wanted, whenever he wanted. For 15 years, that's exactly what he did. November 2023. That's when everything started to fall apart. Cassie Ventura, the singer, the model, the woman who'd been in a relationship with Combs for over a decade, filed a lawsuit. And girl, the things in that lawsuit were heavy. She wasn't just talking about one bad night or one argument that got out of hand. She was talking about years of physical abuse, sexual coercion, being forced into what Combs called freak-offs, these drug-fueled encounters where she'd be made to perform with other people while he watched and recorded. The lawsuit talked about him punching her, giving her black eyes, busting her lip. It talked about him blowing up a man's car because he thought Cassie was interested in him. It talked about control so tight she couldn't even live her own life. And when she tried to leave, that's when things got worse. Now, Combs settled that lawsuit real quick. We're talking within 24 hours. Paid Cassie $30 million to make it go away. No admission of guilt, just money changing hands and both sides saying they resolved it amicably. And for a minute, it seemed like maybe that would be the end of it. Maybe the money would make the story disappear like so many stories before it. But then May 2024 happened. CNN got their hands on security footage from the Intercontinental Hotel in Los Angeles. March 2016, and what we saw on that tape, there was no denying it, no spinning it, no explaining it away. The video showed Cassie leaving a hotel room, trying to get to the elevators. And here comes Sean Combs running down the hallway wearing nothing but a towel, grabbing her, throwing her to the ground. She's on the floor and he's kicking her. Then he's dragging her back down the hallway by her hoodie. She tries to get up, tries to get to a phone on the wall, and he comes back, shoves her into a corner, throws something at her. We saw it. The whole world saw it. And you can't unsee something like that. After that video dropped, Combs posted an apology video. Sat there talking about how he was disgusted with himself, how he took full responsibility, how he'd hit rock bottom and gotten therapy.
Make no excuses. My behavior on that video is inexcusable. I take full responsibility for my actions in that video. I'm disgusted. I was disgusted then when I did it. I'm disgusted now.
But notice what he didn't say. He didn't say Cassie's name. His lawyers told him not to. And that tells you everything you need to know about how sorry he really was. But Cassie wasn't the only one. There was another woman, Jane Doe, whose real name was kept private for her safety. Jane had her own story, and it was just as bad. She testified that Combs had physically assaulted her too. Punched her, kicked her, slapped her so hard she fell down. And this wasn't ancient history. This happened in June 2024. That's last year. After the raids on his homes. After Cassie's lawsuit. After the world was watching. He assaulted her and then tried to force a pill down her throat, telling her, take this effing pill, you aren't going to ruin my effing night. Then he had the nerve to ask her, is this coercive? Like he knew exactly what he was doing and didn't care. Other women came forward too. A woman named Nia spoke about sexual assault. Another woman, referred to in court documents, talked about years of abuse. The story started stacking up and the pattern became clear. This wasn't about one bad relationship. This was about a man who used his power, his money, and his influence to hurt people and get away with it for years. The federal government started paying attention. In March 2024, Homeland Security raided Combs' homes in Los Angeles and Miami. They found evidence, lots of it, drugs, weapons, over 1,000 bottles of baby oil and lubricant. They found videos, recordings, documentation of what prosecutors would later call a criminal enterprise built around sexual abuse and trafficking. The indictment came down in September 2024, racketeering conspiracy. sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution. The government alleged that from 2009 all the way through 2024, Combs had been running what amounted to a criminal operation. He'd been transporting women across state lines and international borders for the purpose of engaging in sex work at these freak-offs. He'd been using his employees, his security, his assistants, his whole network to facilitate it. The charges were serious. If convicted on everything, he could have been looking at 20 years to life in prison. They held him without bail at the Metropolitan Detention Center in Brooklyn, a facility known for being one of the worst in the federal system. For over a year, he sat in that jail cell waiting for trial. The trial happened over the summer. 8 weeks of testimony. Cassie didn't testify. She'd already gotten her settlement and moved on with her life, but Jane did. Other witnesses did. The jury heard about the abuse, the manipulation, the control. They saw evidence of the freak-offs, the drugs, the recordings Combs kept like trophies. But when the verdict came back, it wasn't what prosecutors hoped for. The jury acquitted him on the racketeering charges, acquitted him on the sex trafficking charges. Those were the big ones, the ones that carried the heavy sentences. What they did convict him on: transportation to engage in prostitution, the Mann Act charges, moving women across state and international lines for sex work. And that's what brought everybody to the courtroom for sentencing. Because with those convictions, there wasn't a mandatory sentence, no automatic life in prison. The judge had a range to work with. The defense wanted 14 months, basically time served, since Combs had already been locked up for 13 months. The prosecution wanted 11 years. The probation department recommended 7 years and 3 months. Nobody knew what the judge would do. The courtroom in downtown Manhattan was packed, body to body, not a single seat empty. Sean Combs walked in wearing civilian clothes, a tan sweater, white undershirt, dark pants, not the jail jumpsuit he'd been wearing at previous hearings. He waved at his family, did a little prayer gesture with his hands, but you could see it on his face. The nerves, the weight of not knowing if he'd be walking out of there or going back to that cell. And his family showed up heavy, his mother Janice Combs sitting in the front, his sister Keisha, his children, all of them except his 2-year-old daughter Love, Justin, Christian, Quincy, the twins Jesse and Delilah, Chance. They were all there. The mothers of his children came too. Misa Hilton, Sarah Chapman, Dana Tran, even people from his circle, producers, security guards, close friends. 30 people deep in those front rows. One person who wasn't there, she'd been expected to give a victim impact statement, but at the last minute she changed her mind. The prosecutor stood up and said Naya no longer wanted to speak in court. The tone of the defense's response letter to her statement had been too harsh, too aggressive. It scared her off. The judge himself would later say the defense's letter was completely inappropriate. But the damage was done. Naya stayed home. The prosecution went first. The prosecutor, Christy Slavic, stood up and made it clear what this was about. Accountability. Justice. She reminded the judge that this wasn't just about hotel nights and freak-offs. This was about a man who did horrible things to people for 15 years straight. From 2009 to 2024, a decade and a half of abuse. She talked about how Combs weaponized his money against his victims, how he used currency like a tool of control. And she pushed back on the idea that just because he was only convicted on the Mann Act charges, the violence should be ignored. The violence was part of it. The violence was always part of it. The government wanted 11 years. They didn't want the judge to split the baby, to try and make everybody happy with some middle ground number. They wanted accountability that matched the harm. Then it was the defense's turn. And girl, they brought out the whole team. 5 lawyers stood up to speak. 5, all of them taking turns trying to paint a picture of a different Sean Combs. They argued he didn't make money off the convictions. That in most Mann Act cases, you're talking about pimps trafficking minors, immigrants being smuggled, homeless people being exploited. But Combs, they tried to say this was different. They brought up his drug addiction, how he'd been using drugs for 25 years, going back to 2000. Like that was supposed to explain it. Like being on drugs for 2 decades was somehow a defense, and not just more evidence of how long this had been going on. Nicole Westmoreland got emotional talking about all his business accomplishments. The record label he built from nothing, the clothing line, the television network, Revolt, She tried to make it seem like he spent most of his adult life trying to help the black community, trying to give back, and that all of this was just him being a man who made mistakes. Brian Steele talked about Combs having untreated trauma, how there were times in his life when he'd flatlined from drug use, how he was trying to be a better version of himself. Xavier Donaldson said Combs wasn't just a pimp, that while he was in the detention center, he'd been helping other inmates in ways that politicians and billionaires who'd been locked up never did. Mark Agnifilo tried to connect it all back to childhood trauma, saying domestic violence comes from unhealed wounds. The whole defense strategy was pulling at heartstrings, trying to make everyone see Sean Combs as just a man who made terrible mistakes and deserved another chance. But here's the thing. Only one of those 5 lawyers even mentioned the victims. One. Then came the moment everyone was waiting for, the children's impact statements. They all walked up to the podium together. Quincy, Justin, Christian, the twins Jesse and Delilah, and Chance, a united front, and one by one they spoke. Quincy went first. Now Quincy isn't even Combs' biological son, but he said he is our father. In front of us, he's a changed man. Week after week, we see him evolve. Our father will never do anything to jeopardize his freedom ever again. Justin said, please give our father a second chance. This has been the toughest time he's ever been through. This time saved my father's life. I talk to my father every day. He's changed for the better. I ask you to see my father the way I do. Christian brought a little personality to it. He said, I'm the one who people say I look the most like my pops. I studied my dad up and down. He's my superhero. He taught me to treat women with respect. That line right there made a lot of people's faces screw up because the irony was loud. But it was the daughters who really hit different. Jessie Combs broke down the second she got to that podium, tears streaming down her face. We aren't here to excuse his mistakes. We need him in our life. I lost my mom when I was very young. He promised to be there to keep us safe. Chance said we're just his daughters, but we do need our father. When we talk, he speaks with a clear mind. He's more patient. He's thoughtful. He wants to be a better man, a better father. He's parented our 2-year-old sister from jail. Our sister deserves a father who's present to teach her how to ride a bike, to tuck her in at night before she goes to sleep. And Delilah closed it out. We're scared of the thought of not having our mom and our dad in our life. These are the years that we'll never get back. I know that much of the missing years hurt because we have lost our mom. We already lost so much. Please, Your Honor, give our family the chance to heal together, not as a headline, but we're trying to do better. The emotion in that courtroom was real. These kids had been through it, lost their mother Kim Porter years ago, now facing the possibility of losing their father too. And they stood there begging the judge to give him another chance. After the kids spoke, the defense played an 11-minute video, a whole tribute to Sean Combs, showing his accomplishments, his charity work, his charter schools, his voter registration drives, clips of him with his children. It was like a love letter, trying to humanize him, trying to show that he wasn't just the man from that hotel video, that he was more than that. Then it was Sean Combs' turn to speak. He stood up, took a deep breath into the microphone. Everybody heard it, and then he started talking. I want to thank you for giving me a chance to speak up for myself. It's the hardest thing for me to do was to not speak throughout all of this. And then he said something that caught people off guard. I want to apologize again to Cassie Ventura for any pain that I caused emotionally or physically. He actually said her name. In the apology video, he never did. But here in court, he said it. I would like to apologize to Jane. I didn't mean to hurt you. I would like to apologize to all of the victims of domestic violence, too. He kept going. It'll always be a burden that I'll have to carry. My actions were shameful and disgusting. I was out of control. I needed help. I didn't get the help. I got lost in my journey of life. I'm not this larger than life person. I got lost in the excess. I got lost in my ego. I lost all of my businesses, my career, my reputation. I lost myself, my self-respect. I've been humble. I hate myself right now. I've been stripped down to nothing. Then he turned to his family. That's when his voice started breaking. I failed y'all as a father. You deserve better. Looking at his mother, I failed you as a son. I'm sorry. I failed my community. I wanted to be a shining example of what people could do, what we could do. He told the judge he wanted to be an example of what a person can do if they're given another chance. I thank the jury for my acquittal, but I take my Mann Act convictions very seriously. I want you to make an example of what a person can do if they're given another chance. I would never jeopardize being away from my family, no matter what anyone says. I'm truly sorry." And that was it. He sat back down. After everything, after all the speeches and tears and videos and apologies, the judge did something nobody expected. He took a 5-minute break, 5 minutes, that's all. But in those 5 minutes, people started wondering, did something they said actually get through to him? Was he reconsidering? Was Sean Combs about to walk out of there? Judge Arun Subramanian came back and started talking. And at first it sounded like maybe, just maybe, Combs was about to catch a break. The judge said, "I consider that you are an artist and a businessman, and your work history is celebrated." He used the word iconic. It's impressive given the early death of your father. Your work with inner city kids is commendable. There's no doubt that you are devoted to your family. People in that courtroom had to be holding their breath because it sounded like the judge was leaning light, like he'd been moved by the kids, by the video, by the whole redemption narrative the defense built. But then the judge kept talking. "The court knows that you do have problems with addiction, that drugs may have exacerbated your conduct over the years." A pause, and then the turn. "But the court rejects the defense's narrative of the whole sex, drugs, and rock and roll, that this was just comes with the lifestyle of being an artist, a musician, a producer. There it was. You abused power and control over women who loved you. You used that abuse to get away, and the evidence of abuse in connection to freak-offs and hotel nights is massive. We saw the gashes and the bruises and the broken doors." The judge wasn't letting him off, he was just getting started. Jane and Cassie thought about both ending their lives. Let that sit for a second. Both of them had been so broken down by what Combs did to them that they considered suicide. These were very serious offenses. You plied Cassie with drugs. Your conduct went over for more than a decade. You were no John, but you were just more than that. Then the judge brought up something that really mattered. June 2024, the assault on Jane. That happened after Cassie's lawsuit, after the raids on his homes, after the hotel video leaked to CNN, after the whole world was watching. And Combs still put his hands on a woman, still brutalized her, punched her, kicked her, slapped her so hard she fell down. And after he beat her, he tried to force a pill down her throat, saying, "Take this effing pill. You aren't gonna ruin my effing night." Then he asked her, "Is this coercive?" The judge said that showed him everything. Even with all the scrutiny, all the eyes on him, Combs couldn't stop himself. Or worse, he didn't want to. These acts of sexual violence, substantial sentence must be given. For a second, it seemed like the judge might agree with the prosecution, maybe even more. But then he said the government's proposal was more than necessary, that it wasn't reasonable. He also said the defense's proposal, basically time served, didn't account for the violence, the aggravating factors. 14 months wasn't enough. And then he handed down the sentence. 50 months in federal prison. 50 months. That's 4 years and 2 months. With credit for the 13 months he'd already served, he'd be doing about 3 more years. With good behavior and the 85% rule in federal prison, he could be out in 2.5 years, maybe less. The judge said it's hard time in prison, but you will have a life after this. A life after this. That's what Sean Combs got. A second chance. Not the second chance he wanted, not walking out that courtroom to go schedule his speaking engagements for next week like he'd apparently planned, but a second chance nonetheless. But then the judge did something that mattered more than the sentence. He turned his attention away from Sean Combs and spoke directly to the victims. "To Ms. Ventura, we heard you. Mr. Combs will never be able to wash it away." He talked about Cassie and Jane speaking out, giving a voice to survivors everywhere. "Your families are proud of you. I am proud of you. You're speaking to the millions who didn't have a voice. Violence behind closed doors doesn't have to stay hidden forever. I know you bear the trauma of what happened. Even though you were a victim, you don't have to be." That right there, that's what a lot of people needed to hear. Because in all of this and all the talk about Sean Combs and his kids and his career and his trauma, the victims kept getting pushed to the side. But the judge centered them, made it clear that he saw them, that their pain mattered, that their courage mattered. Then he turned back to Combs. "Mr. Combs, these crimes were serious." He read parts of Cassie's letter to the court, and at the end he said, "You and your family will get through this. I'm counting on you to make the most of your second chance. Court adjourned. Just like that, it was over. U.S. Marshals came to take Sean Combs back into custody. He wasn't free. He wasn't going home. Before they let him out, he turned to his family one last time. "I'm sorry and I love you," he told them. And then he was gone. 50 months. For 15 years of abuse. For Cassie being dragged down that hallway. For Jane being beaten and forced to take pills. For all the women whose names we'll never know who suffered in silence because a powerful man thought he could get away with it. Some people called it justice. A lot more people called it a joke. Because here's the truth. If Sean Combs wasn't rich, if he wasn't famous, if he didn't have 9 lawyers and $30 million to settle lawsuits and a whole machine built to protect him, he'd be doing decades. But money talks. And in America, it talks loud enough to turn 15 years of terror into 4 years in prison. But here's what can't be bought. Cassie Ventura spoke up. She broke the silence. And when that hotel video came out, there was no denying what she'd been through. Jane spoke up too. Nia spoke up. And because they did, other survivors saw that it was possible. That even when the abuser has all the power in the world, the truth still matters. Sean Combs will get out of prison. He'll probably try to rebuild his career, his image, his life. Whether he's actually changed or just got better at hiding who he really is, time will tell. But what he can't rebuild is the lives he damaged. Cassie will carry that trauma forever. Jane will carry it. Every woman he hurt will carry it. So yeah, the sentence was light. The justice system failed. Again. But the story got told. And sometimes that's the only justice victims get. Their truth. Out in the open. Where nobody can deny it anymore.